It had been a busy day for Jesus, one that started out with him teaching in a synagogue, which may not sound like a big deal to some folks, but if you've ever gotten behind the pulpit to preach or taught a Bible study, you know it takes a lot of prep work to be an effective preacher or teacher, so much so that you might feel exhausted when it's over. But any preparation that Jesus may have done for his synagogue presentation was wasted when someone with a demon made his entrance. So Jesus had to stop and cast out the demon before he could continue. And if that wasn't enough, when he and his disciples made their way to the home of Simon and Andrew, probably hoping to dig into a nice home-cooked meal, there was no food waiting for them because Simon's mother-in-law was sick with a fever. And so Jesus healed her. And naturally, word quickly spread that Jesus was able to cure illnesses and cast out demons. So we read that by sunset, the whole city was at his front porch, wanting a piece of that healing. It's pretty clear that Jesus hadn't read anything about setting healthy boundaries. He didn't refuse their demands. He wasn't assertive. He didn't clearly communicate his boundaries, ask for space, or protect his time. He just went to work healing people and casting out demons. As it turns out, he was pretty good at this sort of thing. So after a day like he had had, you would have thought he would have slept like a rock. But maybe the excitement of the day's events kept him from drifting off. Or maybe it was something else altogether. Maybe there was something nagging at him. By all accounts, the day had been wonderful, and yet something didn't feel quite right. So since he couldn't sleep, he got up before dawn and went to a deserted place and prayed. He had to get away from anything that might distract him from God's voice. And so when the disciples finally tracked him down, ready for a second round of healing miracles, they must have been pretty surprised when he said, "We're not going to set up camp here in Capernaum, as tempting as it may be. We're not going to wait for people to come to us. It's time to pack up and head out so we can spread the word about the good news of God's kingdom. For that is what I came out to do." You see, Jesus had almost gotten sidetracked into doing what the public wanted him to do instead of doing what God wanted him to do. If he was only willing to put his healing skills to work, there's no question he would have been rewarded with popularity and praise and fame. It would have been so easy to set down roots in Capernaum, especially for people like Simon and Andrew, whose home was there. Just stay where they were, start their own mega church, and let the people come to them. Not a bad gig. I think we fall into the same trap today. That's why so much church money goes into building projects and pipe organs and programming. It's all designed to attract people to the church instead of reaching out to people where they are. Instead of searching for one lost sheep, it's about being pleased with a flock of 99. It's easy to get distracted by measurable success. I can almost see one of the disciples standing by Jesus in that house with a clicker in hand. That makes 52 healings and counting. Next. Come on, folks, we have a quota to make. But I have a confession. I would have been that disciple. Because I like numbers. And numbers are one way to measure success. But when you stand in a pulpit and preach, it's hard to measure success. You just don't know if you've made any difference at all in the lives of the people who are supposed to be listening. I can preach until I'm blue in the face that God is not a cosmic Santa Claus who rewards faithful Christians who diligently follow all the rules with a life of good fortune. And still people are confused and upset when they get sick or a loved one dies in spite of their prayers. They are good people who are afraid to move beyond the idea of the transactional God that has been presented to them in the past, because this new image seems to be less powerful to them. They are good people, but nevertheless untransformed by any sermon of mine. I can preach about how Jesus washed feet as an example for what we should be doing, how he commanded us to love our enemy, to forgive, and to turn the other cheek. And still I watch bickering, vengeance, and infighting take place among church members. They too are good people who have been hurt and can't help from responding by making the other person hurt as much as they do. Good people, but again, untransformed by anything I might have to say. It makes me wonder sometimes if anyone is listening to anything I have to say. But then I read William Willimon's words about the matter. Sometimes a word is heard. Someone is challenged all the way to the tip of the soul. The world is torn apart and reconstructed in such a way that that person can only turn around and be converted, or else live embarrassingly out of step with the way he or she clearly sees the world to be. So I keep doing what I do. My job is to always remind you of our obligation to manifest God's love in the world at large. My words will no doubt continue to fall on a lot of deaf ears, but every once in a while, someone will realize that God is calling us to a success that's not measured by the ending balance of a financial report or the upswing of an attendance plot on an Excel spreadsheet, but instead with one-on-one encounters with people. Success in God's kingdom happens by setting aside your agenda for a minute and listening to another person's story. It happens when you don't get home quite as quickly after worship because you agreed to give a ride to someone you encountered who was using our outdoor pantry. It happens when you care enough to pick up the phone and make a call to the person whom you haven't seen at church in a while, instead of asking the pastor what's going on with them. It would have been so easy for Jesus to have placed all of his focus and energy on the townsfolk in that one particular city. But a night of prayer revealed that God was calling him outward. God is calling us outward too. We come to worship, to church, to worship God as a community of believers. That happens inside these walls. And that's fine. But God's kingdom is spread when we manifest in word and deed God's love for even the least of these. It happens when we set aside our ego and embody a love for people who may have hurt us or made us angry. And it happens when we do the risky business of reaching out to people who might not respond in the way that we had hoped or expected. Jesus accepted that risk. He was willing to let go of success by society's standards and instead aim for success by God's standards. The question for you and me is, are we willing to do the same? Amen.